It is good to see friends and longtime friends, some of you, and for those we'll just get to know, I'm glad to have you with us tonight. I am Chris Romain. I'm president of University Circle Incorporated. I was taken by Howard Mayer, who I think was at our first meeting, but he's the former Metropolitan Planning Organizational Director, and it's good to have a transportation person who's dedicated his whole life to this, to be back spending time with us at our Pedestrian Safety Advisory meeting. It is great to have all of you residents, advocates, friends near and far, University Circle Incorporated, University Circle Police Department, and UGO, our Transportation Demand Management team, are really glad you're here. You're here because you care. You're here, many of you as residents who literally we consider often the eyes and the ears, the first reporters of incidents that we need to address on the streets, on the sidewalks, sometimes off the curbs. We appreciate you, just your everyday efforts, whether you're a resident here or work for here or a common visitor or somebody just taking interest in the subject. I think the paramount importance of cities are not only to provide mobility opportunities, but also address the challenge that often is the case of pedestrian safety. And we know from University Circle and past reports, that has been a challenge in University Circle. I don't need to tell those of you who live here, we have a growing workforce that's grown quite a bit over the last few decades in University Circle, grown to be one of the largest employment centers in the state of Ohio and the second largest in the city of Cleveland. So we are the other downtown in University Circle and Greater University Circle. Proud to be a neighborhood in the city of Cleveland, surrounded by many other great neighborhoods here in our city. But the workforce flow that brings us some 50,000 workers a day, notwithstanding the pandemic we've been in, which may have changed that a bit, but not much in University Circle. As we look around, our neighborhood is more traffic traveled, more commuter destination than most because of the presence of frontline workforce in the hospital industry and the fact that our university students have returned for live learning and will do so again in the fall. So we're a busy place of 50,000 workers, of over 10,000 residents, as you count our residential blocks and the nearby neighborhood blocks around us, and 3 million visitors, which we're glad that our education, medical, arts, and cultural institutions bring people from all over the globe to University Circle, and they are traveling on many modes more than just the car, often on their feet, and often, as you know, by shuttle, by bicycle, and by other means, some that's new transportation vehicles that we're beginning to get used to, that things we hadn't seen a decade ago. So it's an exciting, dynamic place. You're a big part of that, but the fact that you continue to be caring about our paramount importance of safety and mobility, we're glad you're back. And I know many of you have been regulars on our transportation symposia that we've held over the last year, a great four-part series that we hosted, Mobility in the Modern Era, this past year. So thanks for being with us again. This is the second of 4 community meetings, although we may have more, but we're scheduled for 4, hosted by UCI and the UCPD, again on the topic of pedestrian safety. Before we get started further into this, I wanted to introduce some of our UCI and UCPD team that is here with us. You'll hear from a few of them in a minute, but our University Circle Police Department Chief Jim Rapicki, tireless as he is, always here. Thank you, Chief, for being with us today. He's also a very busy person with his team at the University Circle Police Department. UCI's Transportation Director, Annie Pease, is with us today and will be speaking in just a minute as one of the 2 presenters alongside Chief Rapicki. And then our facilitators are going to be with you in breakout rooms, include our Vice President of Community Development, Debbie Berry, our Planning Director, Elise Yablonsky, our Design Manager and Planning and Design Manager, Matt Provolt, and UCI's Director of Communications, David Razum. And if I missed any of our team, we'll get you introduced as well. But thank you, Team UCI and UCPD. They're going to be your hosts in the digital breakout rooms later today. We've all gotten used to Zoom, maybe too used to it, but it does in large crowds work pretty well in terms of being able to convene and break out and come back in plenary session and talk. And that's just what we'll do today. I did want to remark on, I think, something that's been an achievement that we've really worked at as an organization. Over the last year, our team has been working to curb a disturbing pedestrian safety trend in the circle. We've honed in on, specifically in our most recent months, the winter months, maybe behind us now, but the particularly dangerous time for pedestrian safety. You may know the why, but the why often has to do with the darkness of the skies, particularly at commute hours, that's made it difficult for pedestrians passing by to simply pass through the circle safely. Our team will walk through with you the interventions and safety data in more detail, but I'm happy to tell you, and this sounds like what should be commonplace, but we had a goal this last 4 months at the end of 2020 and the first couple of months of 21, and that was to zero out pedestrian fatalities. And why I say that should just be an everyday common axiomatic goal is that everybody should remain safe just walking around in a neighborhood and crossing the street on their feet. But the sad fact of the matter is, with the confluence of a number of vehicles, the workforce and otherwise, we have not always had a safe network of streets for our pedestrians. In fact, 2 years prior, we lost 2 residents. We lost 2 residents who were simply just walking to and from the circle on outlying streets right here in the circle and right adjacent neighborhoods. We lost a resident, longtime resident from Huff and from Glenville. So we took it very seriously. That was at the end of 2019. And in 2020, we set about on a campaign to zero out, in the same tradition as the pedestrian goals that the city of Cleveland has with Vision Zero. And I see Callie Mersman here today. Thank you for joining us, Callie, and others that might be with the city. Thank you for your efforts. It's a in tandem goal here in University Circle to zero out pedestrian crashes and serious crashes, as well as what we did, which was eliminate any pedestrian fatality. It sounds again like it should just be commonplace. It should be commonplace, but we're working on it. We got to work on it. So I'm proud of the team for the interventions you made to make pedestrian traveling a safer experience. And we'll stay committed and vigilant to that goal. So we're continuing our work to, again, eliminate serious crashes and crashes of all kinds. And we look forward to sharing more of that progress with you here tonight. And we also want to hear from you on things you'd like to bring to our attention. So we will stay at it. Our transportation initiatives in University Circle are robust because of the visitorship, the workforce, the neighborhood residents who are here. I think we've never been more active than now, and we're committed to making mobility and transportation safety key priorities for the quality of life of this neighborhood that we hope is a template for the entire city. Thanks again. I'm going to now turn it over to our transportation director, Annie Pease, who I think is also going to queue up Chief Rapicki and give a report also of her own. So Annie, back to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's great to see so many folks on. I recognize a number of people who joined us from our first meeting that we held on this topic in January on Zoom. So welcome back. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Just to give you a primer on the agenda for today's meeting, we're going to start by talking about some of the work that we've done so far. As you see, I became more aware of our pedestrian safety issues, a number of the interventions that we've made to date. We have some data. Chris mentioned we've really honed in on the winter months as a particularly dangerous time for pedestrian safety. So we've started tracking crashes during the months of November through February as a key time frame to improve pedestrian safety, with an eye towards improving pedestrian safety at the time when it's the most difficult to. Will hopefully have a positive effect on pedestrian safety at all times of year. So we'll walk through what the most recent winter, what those 4 months of data looked like relative to pedestrian safety. And then we have an intervention that is planned that we will be rolling out soon in partnership with the City of Cleveland that we'd like to share and get your feedback on as well. So a little bit different for those of you who attended our meeting in January. We were very active in the chat box. which is fine. But what we're going to do different with this meeting is that at the end, for the last 20 minutes or so, we'll break out into breakout rooms. And that will be, you'll have 10 minutes with a facilitator with our UCI staff to provide feedback on the interventions that we're talking about and other issues that maybe we don't talk about in today's meeting that you want to make sure that we are aware of. So you will have time at the end of the meeting to raise issues to our attention. You can ask some questions there, but really our facilitators will be taking notes on what you say so that we have a chance to hear from you. If you have, I think the chat box in this meeting will be a good spot for clarifying questions. If there's something that come up that doesn't make as much sense, given that we have a good sized group on here, using the chat will be a good way to get clarification on any questions that you have. So with that, I'm going to launch into the content of our meeting. And the first thing I'd like us to do is a quick poll question. You're going to have a pop-up appear on your screen, and it is going to ask you how you identify with University Circle. So we'll launch that poll question here now. And in this poll question, you can select more than one of those boxes. So if you both live and work in the University Circle, select those first two boxes. We have about 2/3 of people have responded so far. Give people just a few more seconds. All right, I'll end this now. Thank you for your participation. So we have close to 40% people who identify that they live in University Circle, 40% work here, 50% visiting regularly, and 6% generally interested in pedestrian safety. So that's great. Thank you all for joining us. This helps us have a better sense of who's in the room here, our virtual meeting room. So I'm going to talk about some of our interventions so far, and I want to start by explaining UCI's role in pedestrian safety. So many of you I know on this call are very familiar. Whoops, I'm going to reshare my screen here. All right. Can folks see my screen okay? Great. So I know many folks on the call are familiar with UCI as an organization, but to those who may be a little bit less familiar, I want to start with a primer because pedestrian safety really touches so much of what we do and so much of what lots of other organizations do as well. So UCI is a nonprofit organization. We're a place-based community organization. We have about 35 staff who work at this brick office you can see on my screen here. And then we have our University Circle Police Department with an operations center and police headquarters on Euclid Avenue. And so the functions of UCI as an organization include transportation planning, community education, public safety, and advocacy. So again, as a nonprofit community-based organization, we're not always in the position to implement the changes that we want, but we are a partner to the community and to the public agencies that we work with. And in that capacity, we always want to have an open door and make sure that the community and our partners know what we're working on, feel comfortable communicating with us, relaying your priorities. So a big part of these meetings is to keep our plans and the things that we're looking at and our priorities clear to our community, which is very diverse, very big. And then make sure that our community members have a platform to weigh in and give us feedback on the direction that we're going. So on pedestrian safety, Chris mentioned in the beginning, and we talked at quite length at the meeting that we had in January about how it was really not this past winter, but the winter before, pedestrian safety came to UCI's attention as in a very short window of time, we became aware of 10 crashes involving pedestrians in marked crosswalks. in a short time frame. And at that time, we took a dive into the data, communicated with our partners, tried to understand whether that was an anomaly or if that was a normal trend. And the data that we found was pretty alarming, and that over the last 5 years, on average, there were 20 people struck by cars in University Circle year to year. And that's an alarming trend given the goals that UCI and many of our partners share for the future of our neighborhood. So in our capacity over the last year and a half, year plus, we've done a lot of awareness raising interventions specifically on the topic of pedestrian safety. So these pictures on the screen provide some visuals of what we've done. We've put some pedestrian awareness statistics and information into our kiosk signs at key locations around the district. This one in the image here is at Euclid, Ford, and Mayfield, indicating that there's over 4,000 pedestrians that in non-pandemic times are crossing that intersection every day, as a reminder to who's using that intersection. We installed reflective posts on crosswalks at a number of the locations where in that first year of crashes that we learned about, a lot of those crashes occurred in the evening times when it was dark outside, and adding reflective posts just makes that crossing more visible. So you'll see these out on East Boulevard and on Cedar. And we added some signs there to let people know why those reflective posts are there, so that if you're waiting to cross the street there, you may see small signs like this at some of our crosswalks, indicating what those reflective signs are, and that UCI is really concerned about pedestrian safety, holding regular meetings, and that we want to hear from the community. We also added maximum speed limit signs to remind, as a community advisor and a community reminder, to remind people of the speed limit on a number of the roads where over the last 5 years of data, we've had crashes. And we've also launched a bumper sticker campaign where we have bumper stickers on fleet vehicles across University Circle. Across 7 institutions, we've installed over 245 bumper stickers. So on fleet vehicles in the circle, you will see some bumper stickers that reminds the car behind them that that vehicle does yield to pedestrians. So it's both an awareness raising tactic and a road safety reminder as to what you're supposed to do as you approach a crosswalk. We also have a platform on our website where individuals can request those bumper stickers. And we've had nearly 20 people request pedestrian friendly bumper stickers through that platform as well. So these encompass a number of our awareness interventions. We've also made some changes to our planning interventions. One practice that we've instituted is when UCI learns about a crash involving a pedestrian, we collect the police report and all the documentation we have about what that crash included. And we meet with an interdisciplinary team of our staff, including planners and the University Circle Police. We look at all that information and schedule a site visit to go out and see what the conditions at that site look like. Are the streetlights working? Are the lights working? Are there signs? Is the crosswalk striped well? We look for conditions that there may be some really short-term or near-term changes we could make to improve that area, but we're also documenting what the conditions are like to inform longer-term planning as well. And so this has really helped us communicate more quickly on near-term changes that we'd like to see, and then also help our team have a better institutional knowledge around the road conditions where some of these pedestrian crashes are happening. We don't want to be only reactive though in our planning. So we've also instituted a practice of collecting close call reports from members of our community when someone is involved in a roadway incident where they are almost struck by a car, or people who have experienced these remember them because they're very traumatic. You feel like you almost were almost struck or were almost involved in a crash. And that data is really helpful to us too, because you know, sometimes it's just very lucky that that didn't end up in one of these crashes, and we have a team going out there to visit the site. So we want to hear about those. We have a platform on our website. The city of Cleveland and Bike Cleveland built this tool as part of the Vision Zero initiative. And we are collecting information through the same portal, but you can enter these incidences right on UCI's Project Yield webpage. And these provide very helpful information about possible problem areas that we check out and inform if it involves an RTA bus or it involves a shuttle or there's a missing sign. That's something we can take action on quickly and hopefully prevent a crash. UCI started communicating this tool in earnest in November 2020. And since that time, we've had 21 close call reports come in just in the University Circle area. Additionally, I'm going to take a sip of water 1 second. That image on the right, since our January meeting, we've had some focused meetings with residents at Judson Manor, up at Park Lane and East 107th Street to talk about some issues affecting residents there, largely focused on 107, Park Lane, and also some busy nearby streets. And it really helps us understand issues facing residents, possibly preventing people from going outside, enjoying green space, and being able to safely navigate their neighborhood on foot, which is a really big priority for our residents and of course for University Circle Incorporated as well. So these are a few things that we've instituted and taken action on recently. I'll turn it over here to our police chief, Chief Rapicki, to talk about parking interventions that we've made since our last meeting as well. And Chief, you're on mute.
Okay, that's better. Thanks, Annie. Welcome everybody tonight. One of the issues that was brought up at our last meeting on January 25th, on Monday, right at the end of the meeting, was people stopping and parking in the driving lane on Euclid Avenue, getting out, going into one of the restaurants to pick up their food or coffee or whatever it is. And then the picture on the left, it also truck drivers just parking and unloading their truck. So we started looking at it as a police department, and one of my main concerns was, can an ambulance or a fire truck get past that truck or a car on Euclid Avenue? And 99% of the time would be no. So we've got to make sure that the public can have service from the fire department or the police department and get by these parked cars or trucks in the driving lane. So after that meeting, I talked to the captain, Stein, and we decided probably from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily, we would be monitoring the traffic on Euclid Avenue. And we also had a meeting on March 12th with the merchants in Uptown and also discussed the problems we had with vehicles parking. And we also showed them this parking picture, and two of the areas of that they could park is a triangle lot down at the middle in the pink down the bottom. That's an hour free. And then also the Plum Market on East 115th also has free parking for half an hour. But unfortunately, people are creatures of habit and they continue to park on Euclid Avenue to this date. And we will continue to enforce the parking so emergency vehicles can get either to the hospital or to their call for service and then return back to the hospital. I think that's all I have, Annie, for those two slides.
Thank you, Chief. So with that, I have a map here. I'm going to turn to the data that we've looked at. The blue circles on this map show the crashes involving pedestrians from the first winter that we really dove in to this pedestrian safety issue. The purple circles on this map show the locations of crashes involving pedestrians in our most recent winter, so the recent November through February. the locations of crashes involving pedestrians. So as a note for folks who are keenly aware of data sources and where these come from, these crashes are those that we have police documentation for. And these allow us to compare year to year, apples to apples. So these do not include the near miss or close call reports that we receive through the website, or if we learned about a crash through another way, but there's not police documentation. This map isn't including those crashes for now. That data is useful to us in other ways, but this map is important because we are looking year to year on how many crashes are occurring and where. And what we can take away from this map right now is that we did have the same number of crashes involving pedestrians in our first year of data collection and our second year of data collection. The very good news is that, as Chris mentioned, there were no pedestrian fatalities this past winter, which should be a baseline all the time. But once you have one, the concern that it could happen again remains high. So we are very glad about that. And for each of these purple circles, we've dug more into the conditions of those crashes, done site visits, and are still in the process. This data collection window ended at the end of February. So we're in the process of following up on some of our findings from those visits. But we wanted to share these and the locations and present these numbers. Chief, is there anything else you'd like to add on this map?
Yes, Annie. I think one of the other things, we are working with Cleveland Public Power on street lighting and with the installation of the new LED lights, which will probably be complete, I believe, in the next couple months or late summer. But that's another cost. Some of these intersections are extremely dark. The visibility, especially when it's raining or snowing at night, makes the intersection even more treacherous. So we have officers on midnight shift check them usually every couple of weeks to make sure there's any lights out, and then we forward it to CPP via email, and then we check back in a couple of weeks to make sure that they've replaced the lights that were out in the University Circle area. Go ahead, Annie.
Thanks, Chief. And then one more note, this came up in our last meeting. These do involve crashes involving pedestrians or bicyclists. We are including those together. Anecdotally, most of these involve pedestrians. Okay, with that, I'm going to talk about now an intervention that we have ahead of us that we've been working on. And I'll pause at this map again for just a moment. The Uptown District. So I know that we don't have street names on here, but there's a purple circle in between a couple of blues and another purple. The Uptown area is an area of concern as it's a highly walkable, it's a business district. There's always a lot of pedestrian traffic over there. It's an area where we've seen crashes and also an area where we get a lot of complaints about the walkability of the Uptown area. So one of the spots that we've been looking at is Euclid and East 117th Street. And hopefully you can see my screen okay. I know it's a little bit blurry, but we worked with the city of Cleveland to look at this crosswalk, collect some data on volume of cars, speed of cars, number of pedestrians crossing here. We've heard from the community that this is a location where it's really difficult to cross. Cars don't yield very frequently. It's an area where there's a high volume of oversized vehicles, so delivery trucks, transit vehicles, shuttles, lots of traffic. And it's right across the street. We have the Cleveland Hearing and Speech Center is on the left of this image, and the Cleveland Institute of Art is on the right. So that's the south side of Euclid on the right side of the screen. I want to show a clip from some video that we captured over there because it captures one aspect of pedestrian safety that on crosswalks like this, we're very concerned about, both in terms of proper vehicular driver behavior, as well as Chief Rapicki mentioned this delivery vehicle issue of people parking illegally to make deliveries. And this short video depicts that issue pretty well. So on the left side of the screen, there's a person waiting to cross here. He did not activate there are RRFBs, pedestrian activated flashing lights, which he hasn't activated here. But this white car approaches the crosswalk and stops. The pedestrian walks out. And that car traveling next to the stopped vehicle, I'll go back just a little bit, couldn't see that person very well, nor could the person crossing the street see that car in the oncoming lane very well. And what results is the pedestrian scared, the driver was also probably scared, and the person jogged to get out of the way. So this is a condition that's really concerning, and it's one of the most dangerous type of pedestrian crashes because the oncoming car really doesn't see the pedestrian well. So they don't slow down. And we know that the relationship between speed and the likelihood that someone would be injured or killed in the case of a collision is those two are very related. The higher the speed, the worse the crash. So this is an area of concern. We have, this in the instance of this video, this white car was stopping to make a delivery. The person got out of the car. But what can also happen is that the car in the curb lane, like this white car, stops to yield to the person crossing the street, which is what they're supposed to do. And then you still have the same issue where the pedestrian steps into the street and the oncoming car can't see them. So what we are interested in and what we've been talking with the city of Cleveland about is advanced stop lines at the crosswalk. So in this graphic, hopefully you can see this well. This red car is like the white car in that video that we just saw. But in the graphic on the left, this shows what happens like that white car. This car in the curb lane stops right next to the crosswalk, or kind of in the crosswalk, very close to where the pedestrian's crossing. And when that happens, the blue car, the oncoming car in the next lane, their field of vision is kind of this yellow cone area. So that shows what they can see. So they can just see the road right ahead of them. They can't see that side of the crosswalk. They don't see the pedestrian. However, if that car in the curb lane stops further away from the crosswalk, like this image in the second image here, if the red car stops further away, the blue car, the oncoming car, can see the pedestrian, and the pedestrian can see that blue car a lot better. So even if this red car stops to yield and the blue car thinks that that car is making a delivery, or they don't assume that that person's yielding to a pedestrian crossing the street, they still have a longer distance to stop than they did in this first instance, where it's too late when they realize that there's a pedestrian there. So this is an intervention that we are considering. We've considered at 2 different locations and have talked to the city of Cleveland and are going to move ahead with in coming months to install advanced stop bars. This is at Mayfield and Uptown Alley. You can see Mocha on the right side there. This is a rendering. So this just shows what this would look like. It's a drawing. They're not out there yet. But the stop bar would be 30 to 50 feet before the crosswalk. The bar is accompanied by a sign, because a lot of people wouldn't know what this line in the middle of the street by itself means. There's a sign that says "Stop here for pedestrians" with an arrow down towards the line. And this treatment is applied at both approaches to the crosswalk. So this is the same crosswalk, but coming the other way. So now Euclid Avenue is behind us. Mocha's on the left. And this would be like if you're heading from Mocha and Euclid Avenue towards Little Italy, down Mayfield Road. That's that approach. So again, we have the sign and the advanced stop line there. This is another depiction of that same treatment at the location where we had the video for. This is Euclid and East 117th Street. So again, we have the line with the signs. These can be mounted by themselves on a pole, or if there's a pole nearby, that's a good spot for it. This is the approach heading from East Cleveland into University Circle. So this is heading west on Euclid. And then same thing, but other direction. heading eastbound on Euclid. We have that line accompanied by the signs. Okay, so this treatment we anticipate going in later this spring or early this summer. And we think it's important to get the word out about what these signs are there for and why. So at this point, I'd like to turn us over to our breakout rooms, where you are going to have a facilitator, a UCI staff person, to lead you through some questions on this treatment in particular. This is called we're calling this the advanced stop treatment. I want to hear your impressions or your feedback on this intervention in particular. And then we'll also have some time to talk through other areas of concern that we may not have mentioned in this presentation and in the meeting so far, but that we'd like to hear from you on. So at this point, we should, you won't have to do anything to join the breakout room. Once you're in your breakout room, you can come off mute. We'll be in small groups. We'll be randomly assigned, so you may or may not know the other people in your room. Please introduce yourself. It's a friendly space, and we do want to hear from you. So at that point, it would be great for everyone to come off mute, and you can participate conversationally there. Thank you again to all the UCI staff who will be our facilitators, and we'll be in those groups for 10 minutes. So we'll see you when you return, and we'll debrief as a big group what we discuss in those breakout rooms. So we'll see you soon. We don't have too many people. Perhaps if we don't have the breakout room option, we could discuss these questions as a group. And yeah, let's start there. And David, if there's any change in the breakout room, just let me know.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm seeing them on my end, but I'm not sure why you guys are not getting the invites.
Okay, that's all right. So I'll pose the question to the group. And if you raise your physical hand, I will be able to see you. And we can call on folks one by one. And yeah, we're a great group here, and this will be great. So the first question is, what are your initial impressions of the advanced stop treatment with the signs? What do you first think of when you see those things? John, I see your physical hand.
Annie, it seems like an interesting idea, but I think you're going to have a huge number of signs to educate the driving population, because it's all new to both we, the pedestrians, as well as the drivers. And you're going to have to really populate the neighborhood with those signs telling people what they're supposed to do. But it's an interesting idea.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Howard, I saw your hand, and then Meredith, I saw your hand. So we'll start with Howard.
Thanks. I think it's a great idea. A couple of concerns. One is, well, cost, of course. And if you do it there, you should probably consider doing it in many, many other locations as well. Also, who will do the installation? Is that the responsibility of the city crew, or does UCI contract with the city to do that? Because it appears that if the stop bar goes in, it's brand new on a barely visible crosswalk. They really both need to be done at the same time so that it's visible to pedestrians as well as motorists. Anyway,
Very
but
good
I
point.
think it's a great idea and should be advanced.
Thank you. I'm taking notes as you're typing, so I'm listening. And Howard, you brought up one very specific question. The city of Cleveland will do the installation of the signs and the striping themselves for this treatment.
And they'll do the crosswalk as well at the same time?
That is a
They
good
should.
question that we will bring forward. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. These crosswalks were installed with a specific type of application. These are epoxy, so they have some small material in them that make them reflective at night. To your point, Howard, they are
Really?
not as visible as they once were. So it's a very
Okay.
important consideration.
Okay.
Thank you. Meredith.
Yeah, I basically agree with John and on that theme. Do other cities use this? If I'm coming from Chicago to visit a student, will I know what it means? And then I have one other question.
Sure.
And the other question is that I think the stop sign has got to be bigger because it's a great big sign with a little stop sign and there's a group of people around it, a bunch of students, say, wanting to cross the street. People may miss it's a stop sign.
That is a very, very good point. So Meredith, to answer the first part of your question, do other cities use this? Yes, it's a standard crosswalk intervention. When you look at improving how crosswalks work, there's kind of a hierarchy of different treatments you can use. And these are often used in combination with those pedestrian activated flashing lights as kind of the next level. Sometimes they're installed at the same time, sometimes different. But recently I saw these in Akron, actually. And in visiting Portland, Oregon, they had these at a number of crosswalks there. To this second part of your first question, I don't think that means that everyone knows what they are. While they're used in other places, I do still think that there needs to be broader communication and education on what this really means. Thank you. And I took notes on your other comments as well. Jan, I see your hand.
Yes, I just think you need to slow people down. If people are driving 35, 40 miles an hour, they're just not going to see these things. So to me, the priority is slowing the traffic in these heavily pedestrian areas. So I'd rather have a thing that tells you how fast you're driving or have a policeman sitting there, the things that slow traffic. I think a lot of people are not going to see this. They're just going to breeze by.
Thank you. Thank you. Chuck, I see your hand.
Yeah, so I think it's a great idea. I agree that people don't see it. The thing that I see that's happening, and that's even, I drive out the Martin Luther King one, right? Where there is a similar kind of thing, not that you stop before, but I think that the pedestrians sometimes don't understand to push the thing, right? And so they're standing there and like there might be a group talking. And so as a driver, you don't know whether they're just standing there waiting for buddies to come up before they cross, if they haven't pushed the thing. So I don't know if there's a way, and if other places have done it, to like kind of educate the pedestrians, and like even the one where you showed where there obviously was someone standing there who did not push the button to turn the lights on. And so like, was he waiting and then that car stops? Was he waiting for someone to pick him up in that car? What was going on that he didn't push the thing? And why don't people understand that you need to do that? And I don't know how we educate people to do that, but it gets confusing. But I think anything, as she was saying too, to slow things down, I think anything to make people aware. And I think most people do probably react except for like when there's snow on the ground and you're not going to see the white line. But, you know, most people do react to a solid white line, wondering, oh, why is that there? And the light's on, maybe I should stop, you know. And it's
Right.
just kind of a weird.
Right. Thank you, Chuck. We, to a brief comment on one of the things that you said, we had 24 hours of footage at this crosswalk. And the number of people who pressed the button to activate the lights and the number of people who didn't was somewhere close to 50-50. So it is very interesting who and why, you know, that would be more research than what we were doing at the time of this video capture of why they do or don't. But, you know, among people who do press those buttons and the lights are flashing, there were many cars that did not stop to let those people cross. A hunch that I have is it's kind of learned behavior. If people cross there all the time and they are making the effort to press the button and no one stops, why press it? You know, so I think there can be some cyclical behaviors happening there too. But it was also very evident in this footage of how much more visible those flashing lights are at dusk and in the dark. You know, it was cloudy the day that we had the camera out there, as you saw in the video. So you could see that the lights were on in the video, but they were still kind of, you know, there's a lot going on that part of Euclid Avenue. They're still kind of subtle. But at night, they really stand out. So that was particularly noticeable at this location. Barbara, I see your hand.
I'd be concerned about making that little stop sign bigger, because I think that'll confuse people as to what's a stop sign for everybody versus just for pedestrian crossing.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. As a note on the size of the sign itself and on the stop sign, the content of signs that are used to control traffic in the public right-of-way are highly regulated by a guide that traffic engineers use. So I'm not sure whether this specific sign comes in many different sizes itself. That's something we could certainly look into. But what I do know is that the proportion of that stop sign relative to the sign itself is highly regulated. So to your point, Barbara, there's a lot of attention paid to patterns, and people who make these signs know that drivers look for the same thing. And if every stop sign, for example, some were a triangle and some were an octagon and some were a circle, drivers would get confused by that message. So the repetitive pattern is a priority. Other thoughts on this treatment, and then I will kick us over to the next question. Howard.
You mentioned it's highly regulated. Was a warrant study ever done for a traffic signal per se, a real bona fide light? That might be the real solution. I know those are expensive, nobody wants to pay for it, but that's a thought. And the other thing is about the flashing lights. I've talked to people who are in the business of managing these things, and they're basically pretty discouraged about their effectiveness. It's a tool in the toolbox, and you got to use it. But the folks who actually manage these things are pretty skeptical about their success. So another thought.
Thank you, Howard.
Hey,
we have
Howard.
not, go ahead, Chief Piggy.
Howard, comment on your first thing as far as lights. You know, they do studies all the time as far as traffic.
Right.
And if you go farther east on Euclid Avenue in East Cleveland, you notice some lights are missing.
Right.
The reason is they don't meet the standards for having a traffic light at that intersection.
I understand.
That's in the middle of the street, so that would be kind of hard to sell when you're just driving. There's no street intersecting that area on Mayfield Road going south up the hill.
Okay.
Thanks, Chief.
Yeah.
And Howard, we have not done a signal warrant analysis at this location, but I'm going to address a question in the chat as well, whether the city engineers have agreed to this treatment, and they have agreed to this treatment. But in those conversations, there is some discussion as to whether this treatment is strong enough to improve the pedestrian situation there. It's an incremental step, but we definitely discussed the possibility that this isn't enough to improve the situation there. I have Secundra Beasley's hand is raised. Secundra.
Hi, I have two questions. One, the signs that are used for people to cross the street, when they first were installed, they were great because it would tell you like, wait, and then cross. And I was wondering if any of those would be upgraded along with what the driver, a pre-stop before they actually stop. And two, because I live in East Cleveland, this will affect traffic coming in from Euclid into University Circle. I just would like to put a request in that you mention this to the councilman and the mayor of East Cleveland so they're aware of this change, because we don't know in East Cleveland how to proceed going through the city unless we see a sign saying we're going to get a traffic ticket. So highly encouraging to speak to East Cleveland about these changes.
Thank you very much, Secundra. That's a very good reminder to us on the proximity to East Cleveland here and the importance of communicating to our partners in East Cleveland. To your questions on the audible buttons that tell someone to wait before they, and then cross when it's safe to cross. Others at UCI may have a little bit more knowledge of these, but I believe we have those specifically installed at certain locations that may have been upgraded more recently, or at locations where we know that there's a hearing impaired or a visual impaired population that lives nearby. We certainly don't have those at every crosswalk. They are a more expensive upgrade to the push button. So I don't know if there's any more background others could share from UCI, but they are very helpful in the locations where they're located.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think that's typically a special request to the city. And to your point, Annie, usually there's a population that needs extra help, notification when they make those decisions. There were some upgrades made, but I think more in the downtown area than, really out here with the signals that we have with the audio piece.
I would like to ask one more question. Can there be bilingual signs for this new initiative? I understand that people who come to University Circle and come to Case need to speak English, but I was just wondering if there's anything that can be done so that those who English is a second language, they can understand what's going to happen, and then they can be more proactive on how they move across the street and how they drive, as opposed to just passing it off because it doesn't resonate with them.
I don't think so.
Thank you, Secundra, for bringing that to our attention. We have not looked into that. That would be a good question for us to understand how that's handled in other places. My hunch is, given the strong regulation of these signs, I'm not familiar, but you make a very good point. So we'll have to do some research on that. Thank you. So with that, I know we only have a couple minutes left. These were such helpful comments and really important things for us to consider. I don't want to cut us off, but I do want to leave just the last couple minutes here for other issues that you'd like to bring to our attention before we close out the meeting. Other issues as they relate to pedestrian safety.
I would like to.
Oh, sorry, Secundra. Let me call on Chuck, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
So I had asked the question, in the chat when I signed in, that what is the speed limit on Magnolia Drive, and then what does it mean that there are crosswalks, but also the school seems to be putting up signs saying that it's a school zone. You know, these kind of, officer, you probably know what I'm talking about. They're kind of like lean-to signs that say school zone or something, but it's certainly not an official school zone. And does that mean that the speed limit just all the time now has changed where the schools are, or are there times that it changes, or what exactly does that all mean on Magnolia?
Chuck, two things. One, the speed limit's 25 on the side streets.
That's what we thought, yeah.
And the school zone's 20.
Okay.
And technically, those signs are not legal because they're not posted on a pole or sign, number one.
Okay.
Number two, since there is students that are under 8th grade and 7th grade,
right,
you could put a school zone there. I mean, they do it for high schools too.
Right.
But it would have to be marked, and we'd have to probably petition the city or traffic engineering and say, you know, we'd like to.
The present sign, the new legal signs, you know, the greenish yellow ones that were put up for the crosswalk, that's the same as any crosswalk, right? That you stop whenever people are in the crosswalk.
Exactly. I mean, we did that because of the volume of students.
Absolutely. And because of the younger kids as well as the high school kids, and they're going across to eat, right? I mean, their dining room is across the thing from where their classrooms are, I believe.
Right. Yeah,
So,
I agree. That's just basically to slow traffic down and be
And
alert for anybody.
So one of
coming
the
in.
things I'm hearing from staff and other, some members that are coming to the clubhouse is that it seems that as I was talking about what happens sometimes on Martin Luther King, we're seeing something very similar happening there with the school, that it seems the kids kind of congregate at the edge of the walk, you know, the crosswalk area. And it's like they're waiting for a teacher or something to come before then they go across. And so maybe there's could be a little bit of a help in terms of education with having them not wait right at the crosswalk, that people are going to stop and wait to see what's going on. And sometimes it's like, you know, 5 or 6 minutes till the teacher comes and then they all go across, and people, just like you were saying, Annie, in terms of people get used to not doing the right thing. People get used to, well, how long am I going to sit here before someone actually crosses and that. So maybe that could be an education thing to help and I don't know if you've seen that. I've just had some members who do come to the clubhouse say, yeah, they stopped and they waited and they waited and they waited. And it seemed that there was an adult or a bigger person came and then they all crossed. And so, you know, they were waiting for people to cross, but no one crossed.
Hey, Chuck, I'll get a hold of Hawken and see what their policy is.
Okay.
You know, depending on the age of the student and what grade they're in, they might have a rule that there has to be a teacher present when they cross, but we can check into that.
Great. And everybody here agrees absolutely that people should be slowing down, you know, for the kids. I'm not trying to say anything about that. We definitely think it should. And we all figured that it was 25, but we didn't know if then it became officially 20 because of the school things.
Thanks, Chuck.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Secundra, I'll take Secundra's question and then we'll wrap up.
Hi, last week I was by the apartments on Ford Avenue, and there was a ambulance that was coming down the street headed toward University Hospital. There were cars parked near the sidewalk, and there were cars that moved closer to the middle pavement ground. My concern is that there's still a struggle amongst drivers and residents on how to stand, where to stay at when a ambulance comes through. Some people pulled over to the parked cars. Some people went on the other side of the middle pavement area, and the ambulance was able to move around, but it was just very tricky in such a small spot. So it doesn't have to be taken care of now, but I just would like to have it on the agenda on how to improve ambulance service coming through Euclid and having them drop patients off to University Hospital or the Cleveland Clinic.
Thank you. So it sounds like a similar issue on a different scale road where we have, there may have been cars parked illegally along Ford and potentially impacting an ambulance heading down Ford.
Basically, I think the law reads that you should pull to the right when an emergency vehicle comes through. But with the divide in the middle of Euclid Avenue, it's very difficult to move to the left. Otherwise, you're going to be up on the berm or up on the planters. So I would just suggest go to the right, and then the ambulance, if they have to, they'll go left to center. But I suggest the driver stays in their proper lane as far as going west or east, and then just pull to the curb as close as you can. And the vehicle will get around.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. All right, well, we are at 6:35, so we have come to the end. I really appreciate everyone's patience with our breakout room pivot here. Thank you all for your participation and sharing your ideas and your feedback. It's very helpful to us. We are going to schedule our next Pedestrian Safety Advisory Community meeting for August. So you will all, as attendees of this meeting, receive notification about that next meeting. But if you know others who you think would be interested in this topic or have good ideas or feedback, please let them know that we're holding these meetings and that we want to hear from folks. We're of course available outside of these meetings as well. If you have issues that you'd like to discuss with us. My contact information is on UCI's website. You can email me very easily through our website. And thank you to all our staff. Debbie or Chief, any parting thoughts for the group?
The same goes for me as far as contacting. You can either call the police station, or probably 90% of the people in the University Circle have my cell phone, so it doesn't really matter which one you call, but more than willing to talk to if you have any issues or suggestions. That makes the circle better in the long run.
Yeah, and just thanks everybody for being here tonight. I know it's a beautiful night out, and we appreciate your interest in the subject because it is really important to us here at UCI and UCPD. So, and thank you, Annie, for putting this all together, and all the UCI staff as well that stayed on. And we'll work on the breakouts for next time.
Yes, we'll resolve that for our next meeting. Thank you everyone very much for attending, and we look forward to being in touch and continuing to work with you.